sharing with you in this video how to stop repeating the same mistakes and self-teach faster. What I really believe is that it's so easy, so comfortable to fall into this sort of negative loop, where you feel like you're attached to negative thoughts and you're attached to some way of being that is not conducive to your highest vision. And so the problem is that when we're in these states, there's definitely no possibility for a transformation, for a change, for something to be better. And in this video, I'm going to share with you how to avoid this completely so that instead you can again teach yourself faster. And then as a result, this is going to help you to get results faster, inevitably so, not by trying, but simply because you value something more important than just the result. You value the place that you're coming from. And so the first thing that I want to share with you in this video is to understand that in order for a person, I believe, to stop repeating the same mistakes and self-teach faster, a really powerful thing that you can do is have conscious, non-judgmental, consistent actions. And so the reason why I believe this is so powerful is because what we can begin to do is to just be aware of how we're taking action, not judge the action that we're taking, and then also as well, do it on a consistent basis. Just do it consistently. What happens is that you just stop repeating the same mistakes because you're doing so much in the world, but you're not judging yourself and you're doing it so much. You're doing it consistently. And so this is where the application of any theory that you learned in your life is going to be really powerful. And this is where you're going to see the results start to actually happen in your life. And so the reason why I feel this is very powerful is because what begins to happen is that we walk through life and we just simply take for granted that consistent action can help you to learn so much to a point where you can't read that on a book, in a textbook, or on the internet, or in an audiobook, or in a video. You can't receive it like that. There comes a point where you've done enough information seeking, so to speak, and now it's time for you to simply have the application of what it is that you're actually that you're reading about, that you're learning about. And then so again, if we have awareness and how we're taking action, the place that we're coming from, we on top of that don't judge ourselves for the inevitable mistakes that are going to happen, because you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. If you don't judge yourself, but then you just stay consistent, that's going to help you to stop repeating the same mistakes. And then you're just going to learn in that process. You will learn a lot of things in this process where you could not have learned by reading it in a book or reading it somewhere or watching a video. So there comes a point again where the application has to be of the utmost importance when you have enough theory and you have enough knowledge, information. You could say that knowledge is wisdom, and that when you have enough information, now you want to start turning it into knowledge, depending on how you see that word. And so the second thing that I want to share with you in this video is to, for me, this is a really powerful concept, and it's to understand that attachment creates quote unquote negative loops, so negative thinking patterns. And what I mean by attachment is when you lose your sense of self in a problem and who you really are. Because what I think is important to remember is that when you have a negative thinking pattern, when you have a negative situation that comes up, to remember that that doesn't define your vision, it doesn't define your identity, it doesn't define really any part of you that's you need to attach to or create a story about. That is who you are in your existence. It's not necessary. So when we can understand that by attachment, what I mean is losing your spaciousness in a thought, in an emotion, right? Losing your sense of who you really are. Because an emotion is just stuff coming up to the surface, right? A thought is just stuff coming up to the surface. And so when we attach, it creates these negative loops where you start repeating the same mistakes. You're doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Like, it's okay to have high levels of repetition and then refine your action as you're taking all of this action. Because you're taking so much action, you're learning from that information. That's powerful stuff. That's what I'm inviting and encouraging you to do. But it's another thing to just do the same negative pattern to yourself over and over, where you're clearly hurting yourself, but you can't see it simply because there's an attachment and there's not an awareness there. There's not an awareness. When there's no awareness, we lose ourselves in the problem. We become the problem. There's no separation between, okay, here I am. This problem is a problem. It's a situation, but it doesn't define me. But then when the situation becomes so hypnotizing that we lose ourselves in the problem, this is what creates, I call, a negative loop, a downward spiral. Like, when you're in momentum and things just feel great, things are working, things are flowing, you're communicating properly, people are understanding what you're saying, they're following on the same page as you, everybody is on the same page, everything is aligning good, right? That's what you would call an upward spiral, right? Where things are going good, things are going very well, right? Things are going good. But then what would be the opposite of that? It would be a negative loop where the worse it gets, and the more stressed you are, about the fact that you're stressed, and then you're also angry and upset, and then the fact that you even allowed yourself to get angry and upset to begin with. Now, of course, you're angry and upset about the fact that you let yourself get angry and upset. And then you feel guilty about the fact that you can't be the person that you want to be. And then it just goes from there. And that's how the mind works. But if we can begin to notice when these negative loops happen and then the reason that they're happening. And so the reason that they're happening is a lack of awareness, I believe, to be the case. It's a lack of spaciousness. It's just too much investment in an emotion that you don't need to be reactive towards, right? You don't need to react to your own emotions. An emotion can happen. You might feel an emotion. Who knows how reality works? It could be somebody else's emotion like popping up, right? What if it's not even your emotion? No, obviously we can't prove that. That was a joke, because humans are connected, and you might feel other people's emotion. So you might feel other people's emotion, but still, that's not the way to think about it, because we need to take a responsibility of our emotions. And this is not about controlling anybody in the external world. It's about conquering your own emotion and your own negative patterns. That's what this is about. That's what this process is really about, is conquering your own negativity, your own negative patterns. And even if it is somebody else's emotion, so to speak, how would you heal that person? How would you help yourself? You would take it as your own. You would take it as your own emotion. And that's what a person does. That's what a sensitive person does, is that they feel really everything in the environment, but the way to fix that situation is not by attaching to it and then losing yourself in another person's issues, right? You need to hold space and then realize that even if you're feeling stuff in any situation, remember that it doesn't define you. It doesn't define you. And you don't need to tell people this explicitly. Maybe you just hold space in this situation. Maybe you just have a conversation. Maybe you just say hello. Maybe you do whatever you need to do. But the best thing you can do for yourself is to have awareness, no matter what is the case, that your emotions don't define who you are. And whether it's your emotions, whether it's another person's emotions, like we'll say that for another video. We don't really need to make it impractical, but the truth is that awareness is going to be of the utmost importance to get out of this quote unquote negative loop. Whatever this negative loop is, however you want to describe it, whatever perspective you want to have about it, how to remove it from your life is going to be 99.9% of this process. It's not going to be by reading more books. It's not going to be by watching another video. It's not going to be by through a coach or a mentor or a person giving you a golden piece of information. It's just going to be through awareness, through conscious awareness, just simple conscious presence. That's all it really is. Because if you don't have conscious presence and you lose yourself in the problem and try to fix the problem while you're in the problem, that's nonsensical. You can't fix a problem at the same level of consciousness that caused it. That's not how you solve the problem. If you want to solve the problem, you have to step away from the problem, take space from the problem, get clarity on how the situation is, and then you can fix it with space and consciousness and presence. Consciousness and space and presence are the only things that are going to save you from this negative loop. Not a book, not a video, not a piece of information, not something you read on Google. None of these things are going to fix the problem like consciousness and simple presence will. And I'm not saying that consciousness and presence and awareness alone will fix it. It will require action. It might require a video. It might require a book. It might require actually a mentor. But what you need to remember is that at the end of the day, you are the consciousness and the awareness and the healer that's going to do it. And then you can have support systems with you there as permission slips to help you to stop repeating these problems. If that's what you feel, if that's what your presence leads you to feel that you need to do, that's okay. That's all okay and just fine. Permission slips are great. Everything in life, I believe, is a permission slip to help you to feel better. If you believe you need a friend, then go get a friend. If you need a therapist, go get a therapist. If you need a coach, go get a coach. If you want to just simply be alone and do it by yourself, then go do that. But I think support systems are good. Whether it's family, family is important, I believe. So we need to start to remember that whatever you need to do in the outside world is all good and dandy and amazing, and that's all great. That's all great stuff. But remember, if you look only in the external to solve the problem, not trying to remove yourself from the problem, sort of from a meta level, from a consciousness level, you can't solve the problem like that. You have to become more conscious of what's happening. And then from there, you will naturally solve the problem simply by realizing the damage that you're doing. And that's a really powerful technique. And so the final thing that I want to share with you in this video is to understand that learning, quote unquote learning, can only happen detached. It's the only way. So if you want to have any kind of learning, any kind of possibility for growth, any kind of possibility for transformation, if you want any kind of possibility to be better in your life, to improve, even if it's 0.1%, even if it's just a little bit of improvement, even if it's just a tiny little bit, if you want any kind of possibility for this to happen, what's of the utmost importance is that you remain detached. You remain detached from your thoughts. You remain detached from your emotions. You remain detached from your problems. And what I'm not saying by detached is to be non-logical. I'm not saying to not be logical. I'm not saying to not be a person of service and to help the world. I'm not saying to be a person of value and to provide value to the world. That's not what I'm saying. And you'd be surprised. You would think, well, okay, if you remain detached, you're going to be some crazy person. No, I'm not saying to, in fact, not even feel your emotions. You should feel, if you become a person that doesn't feel their emotions, that's, I would probably say, not very healthy. There's a problem there, because if you try to not feel your emotions, I think that's a problem. That's a huge problem, and there's maybe an issue going on there to some degree. But if we can learn to transmute our emotions and to transform our emotions into what we prefer to experience, like if you feel pain in your life, if you feel negativity in your life, to me, the way that I see that situation is that's absolutely an amazing opportunity to just take more action, to just do more stuff in the world, to be better, to improve more. It's like every time you feel any kind of pain, that's your cue from life to say this is your golden opportunity to take more action and to become a little bit better in your, even if it's just a tiny little bit, once again, that's your opportunity. And so just remember that if there's an attachment to a negative loop, to a negative experience, you're not going to be able to improve. Improvement, will not happen. It's not going to happen when we're attached to the old way. So if you think that you've got it all figured out and that you already know the answers and that there's no area for improvement and that you have no sticking points and that you're already happy and that you have what you need and that there's nothing to get better at and you're already good, then you don't need to learn. You're just fine. But that's a problem to me, because I feel that there's only two directions we can head in life. We can either go forwards or we can go backwards. And so if you want to move forward into a better world that's of continual improvement, as time passes by, you become better, you become improved, you become an improved human being. That's a different belief system than a belief system where over time you just get more sluggish and things get bad and you get worse, and it's like, okay, that's just how it is. And it's like, and this is what happens, is that when we have so much pride, when we have so much ego, not that ego is bad or anything like that, not that pride is bad. Pride is not necessarily a bad thing, but too much pride, too much ego, too much arrogance, and now you've lost touch with yourself prior to your ego. And who would that be? It would be really just the conscious presence prior to anything that's happening. And that might sound like a blunt way to say it, but the fact is that really we need to remember our true values, I think, that created this problem in the first place, or our lack of there. Fourth, so if you have a lack of being conscious of your values, if you have a lack of being conscious of what you care about in your life, if you believe that you want something more out there than you care about your state of consciousness, maybe that's why you forgot that your natural state of being is transformation, is improvement. That's what I believe, is that our natural state is to change, is to transform, is to be better, is to improve, is to always be different on a consistent basis. But then somewhere along the way, we believe that we need to attach to something out there and cling on to it for what we believe is going to give us more peace and love and joy and happiness. But then what we find to be the case when we attach to things out there is that we stop learning, we stop transforming, we stop growing, and then we get stuck into a negative thinking pattern, and we're looking for validation out there to make us feel happy, and we're not aligning with who we say we're going to be, we're not aligning with our word, and we're not being a person of integrity, we're not being a person of excellence, and that's a problem. All of these things happen when we are attached. So just remember that if you want to maximize the possibility that you learn, that you improve, that you transform, remain as connected to your emotions as possible, of course. Remain as aware of your emotions, of course. But then with that awareness, what you'll find is that detachment comes naturally. So detachment is what's going to bring that learning, but awareness is what brings the attachment to come to be. So if you really want to have a natural detachment in your life where you're not dishonoring your emotions, because I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm saying as to not feel your emotions, is to not feel the present moment fully. This is not avoiding the present moment. This is not running away from the present moment. This is not to dishonor your emotions or a negative situation. It's to be so conscious, to be so aware, to be so present with the emotion that then you become conscious as well of the consciousness that is aware of that emotion. So if you can remain conscious of the consciousness that is aware of the emotion, that's where the detachment comes in. And then that's when you just look at your life from a meta perspective as you're living, where you're not attaching to the problems that you're doing, and you just fix them. You just naturally fix them, because it's like when you're conscious, when there's no ego, when there's no attachment, when there's no need to fight for a victim mentality anymore, to fight to be a victim. You look at that and you just say, okay, well, here's the problem. I don't judge it. I don't see it as a, it's a problem, of course, but it's like in the bigger picture, it's like, does it define me? Does it have to be recreated more if I choose not to? No, I can change that. Okay, so it's like, just change it. You just change the behavior. So this is where non-attachment and consistency comes back as well, because it's easier to change those behaviors and those actions when you remain detached. And by detached, I mean be more conscious and aware. So I just wanted to make that final point clear before I conclude the video, because detachment might sound like something bad or something weird or something that's like, oh man, that sounds a little strange. It's like, I don't know about that one. It's like, no, really, it's just being conscious and being present. It's just how conscious and present are you with in fact, what I would say is that the more detached a person is to their emotions, the more conscious they are, the more present they are, the more aware, the more that they're aligned with the essence of the present moment. And I think that you might have a fear that this leads to extremely egotistical and erratic and crazy behavior? My claim is that possibly, but I don't think so really. I believe that consciousness and presence and detachment leads to the most wise and the most loving and the most logical, sensical choice when we can be detached and conscious. That's what I really believe, is that consciousness and presence and detachment create not only a learning opportunity, but it leads to the best choice possible for yourself and the others around you as well. Right? Because remember, if you're a victim to your emotions, if you're a victim to your circumstances, do you think that's helping other people? Do you think that's helping? Do you think you're going to be able to make powerful decisions as a leader if you're sort of being picked on by your own emotions and you can't even detach from your emotions? Do you think you're going to be able to be a powerful decision maker if your emotions have conquered you? If your emotions have conquered you, do you think you're going to be able to pass the tests of life when life throws a test at you as you're conquering your, going towards your vision? Or are you going to become emotionally reactive and get upset that, oh, this is not going to happen now because this is how I feel about this thing happening, and so now it means nothing that I want is going to happen? Like, is that what you're going to do? Or are you going to take the tests that life throws at you and just be completely nonchalant and non-reactive to them, and then just continue anyway? Just simply continue on. This is what I believe is going to lead to powerful results, better results in our life, where we start to get the things that we want, but not in a way that's dishonorable to the present moment or to the people around us. Whereas in fact, what I'm saying is that the more attached you are, this is where all the egotistical, negative, disgusting, slimy behavior, cheating, stealing, all these things that you think like that's disgusting behavior that grosses you up. How does this behavior come about? I think that it comes from attachment to emotions, where there's a strong arrogance. There's so much attachment to the ego structure that there's no presence anymore. That's what leads to problems. That's what leads to poor decisions. That's what leads to dishonorable decisions that are dishonorable and disrespectful to the people around that person that's acting in that way, being that way. Because it's not just about how you're acting. You know, life is an act. Of course, life is an act. I think that we're all just actors in a play, you know, and sometimes it's just about, if you want to get the result that you want, you just simply act in a different way. Like, it's just that simple. It's just that simple. You want to get a result, act differently. You need to be a better actor. You know, if you want to get better, if you want to change the results in your life, be a better actor. Go be a better actor. Learn to act. But with that being said, it's not just about how you act. It's also about how you are being. How you are being, the place that you are coming from. And so if the place that you're coming from is, you know, a space of attachment, no matter how you act, no matter what you do, no matter what way you try to copy other people or do things or whatever the case might be, you will never find your own way, because you're just going to be a phony. You know, you can be an actor, you can put on a mask, and that's all great. But if you're only putting on a mask with no essence behind it, there's no connection to the present moment and the place that you're coming from, those actions will always be fueled with resistance, fear, guilt, shame. All these obstacles will come up that you won't even be able to detach from, and you'll just believe in those obstacles so wholeheartedly that you don't have any confidence to even take action on your vision anymore. You don't even have confidence to be who you want to be anymore, because you lost yourself in the problem. The problem became you. You couldn't rise above the problem. You know, you just couldn't do it. You just couldn't rise above the problem. You just had to believe in the test, you know, that you failed the test. So if you fail the test, don't judge yourself. Don't feel bad about that situation. What that is that's a learning lesson. That's an experience that you can take, and now you can be better next time. And then again, going back to the title of this video, you can stop repeating the same mistakes. And that's where you learn, that's where you're better, that's where you improve, is that when you remain in a space of spaciousness itself, when you remain in that space of spaciousness, what happens is that learning possibility improves.